Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hello, my name is Josh Sweeney, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before we get started, we'd like to thank Prototype Prime for this amazing podcasting space. The topic of today is interview questions based on company values. You've heard me in a few of my other podcasts where I speak about using company culture and culture questions to filter people out during the interview process. An example of one of our company culture questions that I shared was, what was the last book you read and why? And when was that? So what was the last book, when, and why? And that got to the heart of the culture of who I am and around wanting readers in our environment, people that I can hand a book to that are also going to get on board and read and educate themselves for our company. And sometimes that can be a hard topic, like posing questions as culture questions and getting to the root of culture, which can be sometimes feel intangible, is a hard way to come up with interview questions. Some people it comes easy, but I think there's another way that we can look at this, and this is from company values. So we can switch culture questions and bring in some value questions and determine if this person is a good fit for your company. Now, this assumes that you have established company values, that your company values have some meat to them, and that you have the ability to flip those values around into a question that's going to filter people based on the type of person you need in your environment. So let's dig into some of these questions. I'm going to use our company values, 3 of our company values, to flip around and come up with those questions for how we would use those during the interview. So value number 1 that I'm going to share is extreme ownership. Our value at Epic Culture, one of them, is extreme ownership. We want people to really own the process. We want them to have enough latitude and accountability to know that they own those outcomes and they're not beholden to any one person or manager to ensure the best outcome, and it's really on their plate to create that best outcome. So that's extreme ownership. So what we can do in order to interview people and see if they convey or have this value or exhibit this value is we can flip it around into a question. Before I tell you what kind of question and how we do this, one thing I really want to highlight is these need to be a blind question. You don't want to do what's called leading the witness, right? You don't want to say, our value is extreme ownership. Tell me how you've taken ownership of a situation, because now you've already implanted in their mind that they need to come up with a really good answer and that this is important because it's one of your company values. So they're put on the spot to come up with this fantastic answer. So they have to come up with something. And that's leading the witness. It's kind of telling them what you want to hear in relation to the question. What we like to do is we like to do more of a blind question. So we're not going to tell them that our value is extreme ownership. If they're really smart, they'll watch these podcasts and learn how to answer. But we have other tactics to filter that out. But with extreme ownership, we're not going to tell them our value is extreme ownership and then lead into the question. Just naturally, as part of our interview process, somebody's going to say something along the lines of, tell me a time when you took ownership of a problem, even when you really felt that you weren't in control or that it wasn't your fault. So tell me a little bit about that. The other ways that you can do it is, tell me a time when you felt like you were blamed for something in your office or in your home environment or in your work environment, and explain that to me. How were you blamed? How did you feel like you weren't in control of that? And then lead into the follow-up question of how they took ownership of it. Now, what you're going to see is a lot of people either take ownership or they deflect. And you want to know, am I hiring? I want to know if they have extreme ownership qualities. Do they own their life? Are they the type of person that owns that? Or are they always deflecting the outcomes onto somebody else and putting that on them? So extreme ownership, turning that around into a question, is one way that we can use values and the company values to find people that are aligned with our values. The next one I like to share is 10X. So the 10X is that go big nature, go fast nature that I have. This comes from Grant Cardone and a lot of other 10X type of content that I've read and dug into, and it's all about going bigger, setting bigger goals. If you take a goal that you have, we want to 10X it. We want to go bigger, and we want to find ways to plan for a much larger outcome instead of having, the original goal that we have. And we structure things based on 10X instead of 1X. So when we do this, the way that we can flip it around is we can ask somebody when they took a certain challenge on. And then as they get into that challenge and what they did, we can ask them how they went bigger, how they did 10 times what was expected of them. An example of that would be this podcast. When I was going through and finding, when I was finding content and leadership around how to record a podcast, I found that many people go in the podcast booth, they bang them out in 15 minutes, and they'll get 4 done in an hour, and they're done for that day. And I said, well, I'm going to flip that around. Our value's 10X. So in our first session, I was in the podcast booth for 8 hours and recorded 24 podcasts. And we looked at it structurally different. We said, what do we need and who do we need in order to 10X it? How do we go bigger? How do we get more content out the door? And that really exhibits the value. So we're trying to come up with questions around where they 10X something, where they went bigger. So that question again, where did you have an expectation of one section of one outcome and you delivered another? This is probably an easy way to exhibit this might be with a salesperson. What time did you get a quota and then just totally blow out that quota? And how often did you blow out that quota? When did you have to deliver content? Maybe you're in marketing and you can ask them, oh, well, how many blog posts did you have to deliver? Oh, well, I had to do 2 a week in my last job. Okay, well, did you ever do 10 in a week? Did you ever do 20 in a week? Did you ever do 5 in a week but plan 10 more? How did you go above and beyond and really 10X that? So those are ways that we can dig into a personality to see if their values align with ours. Another way that we do this is with our last value I'm going to share, which is uniquely better relationships. So I believe in a world where everybody's getting automated and they're doing all of these self-help type of, not self-help, but self-guided training, and every software you package is all self-oriented, right? You go you log the case and you log the issue and you go train yourself and you do everything on your own. It's posed as this benefit, but I think there's going to be a big difference with companies who have better relationships with their clients, who go out of their way to approach them to help them learn more and give that more concierge level service. So our value is uniquely better relationships. How do we go above and beyond every other organization in our industry and maybe even any other industry to create uniquely better relationships? Now with that value, I can again flip that value around and say, what kind of question do I need to ask in order to find out if this person is the type of person that will build uniquely better relationships? So one way would be, tell me a way that you went above and beyond in one of your relationships in business, or tell me what your follow-up procedure is when you go meet with somebody, if you have a meeting. Now, for me, I know it conveys my value and it exhibits the value if not only do I go meet somebody for drinks or have a business meeting, but after that, I always send a follow-up. I send either a thing that says, thank you for your time. I may send a recap of the meeting so that they have those and that I have those information. So I'm providing additional value and another touch point for that person. Another way that I see is, oh, well, every time I go take a certain action, I'm going to write out a postcard and I'm going to mail them a card. An example of this was I was just on the Imagine More podcast, and after being on the podcast, I received a thank you note, a handwritten thank you note. There was a postcard that was thanking me for being on the podcast. So that is a uniquely better relationship. That's that extra action. So you have to dig into yourself, dig in and say, what kind of questions can I ask in that blind methodology, right, without leading the witness, to uncover, does this person take the extra steps and go the extra mile to build build uniquely better relationships. So what I want you to think about is how you can take your values, flip them around into questions that are going to be valuable during your interview process. And how do you use that question to uncover whether the person you're interviewing has your company values or exhibits your values, or whether they don't?
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.